The reconnaissance vessel Quantum Serenity hung silently above Earth's atmosphere, its crystalline hull refracting the pale light of the moon. Inside the observation deck, Commander Zelthris of the Varanthi Empire stood with 3 appendages clasped behind his dorsal ridge, watching the blue planet rotate beneath him with something approaching curiosity. The Varanthi had conquered 47 systems across 3 galactic quadrants. They had never known defeat. They had never known fear. Fear, in Varanthi philosophy, was a biological defect, an evolutionary mistake corrected millennia ago through genetic refinement. The concept existed only in their historical databases, filed alongside other primitive survival mechanisms their species had transcended: aggression born of desperation, panic, irrational emotional responses. Commander, First Officer Kaelin approached, her bioluminescent patterns flickering with controlled excitement. The planetary analysis is complete. The dominant species calls themselves humans. They're remarkably ordinary. Zelthris turned his 3 optical sensors toward her. Elaborate. Kaelin activated a holographic display. Images of humans flickered through the air: a woman pushing a stroller in Central Park, New York, a man grilling burgers in his Austin, Texas backyard, teenagers laughing outside a Seattle coffee shop. Single-gravity world adaptation. Carbon-based. Bilateral symmetry. They possess rudimentary space travel capability, barely beyond their own moon. Their largest cities show significant infrastructure, but nothing that would threaten even our scout vessels. Kaelin's patterns dimmed slightly. Their military technology is quaint. Projectile weapons. Chemical explosives. Nuclear fission devices that would barely scratch our hull plating. And their psychology? Zelthris asked. That's where it becomes interesting, Commander. Kaelin pulled up neurological scans. They possess a fully functional amygdala, a primitive brain structure that processes threat responses. They experience what their literature calls fear on a daily basis. It appears to be debilitating for them. They fear death, pain, loss, failure, social rejection. The list is extensive. A 3rd officer, science specialist Voran, joined the conversation. His patterns flickered with what might have been confusion in a species that experienced such things. I've been analyzing their entertainment media. They create fictional scenarios specifically designed to trigger this fear response. They call them horror films, thriller novels. It's incomprehensible. Why would a species deliberately induce psychological distress? Zelthris considered this. In the 73 species the Varanthi had encountered, catalogued, and absorbed into their empire, none had been as paradoxical as these humans appeared to be. Advanced enough to split the atom, yet still slaves to primitive emotional responses. They're a contradiction, Zelthris mused. Intelligent enough to understand the universe, yet held back by biological programming they haven't evolved beyond. Should we proceed with standard first contact protocols? Kaelin asked. Zelthris looked down at Earth again. North America was rotating into view. The lights of its cities sparkled like bioluminescent algae in a dark ocean. Somewhere down there, in places like New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Houston, humans were living their small lives, completely unaware that their world was about to change forever. No, Zelthris decided. These humans experience fear, which means they can be controlled through fear. We'll bypass the usual diplomatic overtures. Demonstrate our technological superiority. Show them the futility of resistance. Their fear will make them compliant. Kaelin's patterns brightened with approval. A more efficient approach. The Council will be pleased with our shortened timeline. Begin with a demonstration, Zelthris ordered. Something that will trigger their fear response but cause minimal casualties. We want them compliant, not extinct. They may prove useful as a labor class once annexed. What kind of demonstration, Commander? Zelthris's patterns flickered with something that, in a species capable of emotion, might have been anticipation. Their military facilities. Choose one of their bases, somewhere isolated but significant. Use the disintegration beam. Let them watch their strongest defenses dissolve into nothing. Let them feel small. Let them feel afraid. Understood, Commander. Coordinates being calculated now. Voron consulted his data pad. Commander, there's a military installation in the Nevada desert. They call it Nellis Air Force Base. It's located near a city called Las Vegas. Significant military aircraft presence, but far enough from major population centers to limit collateral damage. Perfect, Zelthris said. Kalen, prepare the disintegration array. We'll make our presence known at dawn, their local time. I want the first thing they see when they wake up to be the demonstration of Varanthi power. As his officers moved to execute his commands, Zelthris remained at the observation window. Somewhere below, in the pre-dawn darkness of the American Southwest, humans were sleeping peacefully in their beds. Soldiers at Nellis were completing night shifts, looking forward to breakfast. Families in Las Vegas were dreaming ordinary dreams. None of them knew that by sunrise, their entire understanding of their place in the universe would be shattered. Zelthris had studied enough Earth history to understand how their civilizations responded to overwhelming force. The Aztecs had welcomed Cortez as a god. The indigenous peoples of North America had been swept aside by European technological superiority. Throughout human history, the pattern was clear: when faced with a vastly superior force, humans either submitted or were destroyed. The Varanthi were not conquerors in the human sense. They were collectors. They catalogued species, assessed their usefulness, and integrated them into the Empire's vast infrastructure. Those who cooperated were treated well, given purpose, shelter, sustenance. Those who resisted were eliminated with the same emotional detachment that humans might show when pruning a garden. It was all very logical. Very efficient. Very Varanthi. Disintegration array charged and ready, Commander, Kalen reported. Targeting systems locked on Nellis Air Force Base. We'll be in optimal firing position in 23 minutes. Excellent. And the broadcast system? Prepared. Once the demonstration is complete, we'll transmit our message simultaneously to every communications device on the planet. They'll understand that resistance is futile. Voron approached again, his patterns showing the controlled excitement that passed for enthusiasm among the Varanthi. Commander, I've been analyzing their response patterns. Based on their history, I project a 73% chance of immediate compliance from their governing bodies. The remaining 27% will likely attempt futile military resistance before eventual capitulation. And the civilian population? Widespread panic initially, followed by resignation. Their news media will help facilitate compliance once they understand the scope of our capabilities. Fear will do most of our work for us. Zelthris nodded, satisfied. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The Varanthi had performed this same routine on dozens of worlds. The formula was proven. Overwhelming demonstration of power, clear communication of demands, efficient integration into the Empire. By this time tomorrow, Earth would be the 48th system in the Varanthi Empire. The quantum Serenity glided silently through Earth's atmosphere, descending toward the Nevada desert. Below, the lights of Las Vegas glowed against the darkness, thousands of humans gambling, drinking, celebrating, completely oblivious to the fact that their world was about to end as they knew it. Approaching firing position, Kalen announced. 10 minutes to optimal range. Zelthris watched the desert landscape scroll by beneath them. In the distance, he could see the sprawling complex of Nellis Air Force Base. Rows of aircraft. Hangars. Barracks where human soldiers slept. Command centers where officers monitored radar systems that were, even now, beginning to register the Quantum Serenity's presence. Commander, we're being scanned by their early warning systems, Voron reported. Primitive radar. They're trying to identify us. Let them look, Zelthris said. In a few minutes, they'll wish they hadn't. On the ground below, in the Nellis Command Center, Captain Marcus Rivera stared at his radar screen with growing confusion. The object descending toward the base was unlike anything in their recognition database. It was too large to be an aircraft, moving too slowly to be a meteor, and its radar signature was unlike anything he'd ever seen. "Sir, we've got an unidentified object descending directly toward our position," he called to his commanding officer, Colonel Sarah Mitchell. Mitchell approached the screen, her brow furrowing. "What the hell is that?" "Unknown, ma'am. But it's big. And it's not transmitting any IFF codes." Mitchell picked up the phone to alert base security, but before she could dial, every light in the command center went out. Then, in the sky above Nellis Air Force Base, something appeared that would change human history forever. The Quantum Serenity emerged from its cloaking field, hanging in the pre-dawn sky like an impossibility made real. Its crystalline hull caught the first rays of the approaching sunrise, sending prismatic light cascading across the desert. In the command center, emergency lighting flickered on. Through the windows, Rivera and Mitchell could see the ship hovering above them, silent and massive and completely impossible. "Get me the Pentagon," Mitchell said, her voice eerily calm. "Now." But before the call could connect, the disintegration beam activated. It wasn't violent. That was somehow the worst part. There was no explosion, no fire, no thunder of destruction. The beam simply touched the northwestern section of the base, 3 hangars, an equipment depot, and a section of runway, and those structures ceased to exist. Not destroyed. Not exploded. They simply stopped being. One moment, solid matter. The next moment, nothing. Not even dust. In the command center, Marcus Rivera felt something he'd never experienced in his 15 years of military service. Something primal and overwhelming and completely beyond his training to manage. For the first time in his life, Captain Marcus Rivera understood what true helplessness felt like. And aboard the Quantum Serenity, Commander Zelthris prepared to broadcast his message to the people of Earth, confident that their fear would make them easy to control. He had no way of knowing that he had just made the greatest tactical error in Varanthi history. Because while the Varanthi had spent millennia eliminating fear from their species, humans had spent millennia learning to weaponize theirs. The message broadcasted simultaneously to every screen on Earth at 6:47 a.m. Pacific Time. Televisions in New York apartments flickered from morning news to an alien face. Smartphones in Tokyo subways displayed the same holographic image. Digital billboards in London's Piccadilly Circus went dark, then illuminated with Commander Zelthris's 3-eyed visage. In Sao Paulo, Mumbai, Cairo, Sydney, everywhere humans had built civilization, the message appeared. People of Earth, Zelthris's voice was translated through alien technology into every human language simultaneously. "I am Commander Zelthris of the Varanthi Empire. Your planet has been selected for integration into our domain. What you witnessed at your military installation in Nevada was a demonstration, a fraction of our capability." In a Houston apartment, Elena Rodriguez clutched her 6-year-old daughter Maya close as they watched the message on their television. Outside, the sounds of the city had gone eerily quiet, no traffic, no voices, just the collective held breath of a species confronting the impossible. "We do not wish to destroy you," Zelthris continued. "You will be given purpose within our empire. Your cooperation will be rewarded with security and sustenance. Resistance will be met with the same fate as your Nevada facility." The broadcast showed footage of Nellis, the impossible absence where buildings had stood moments before. "Your world governments have 72 hours to signal their surrender. Comply, and your species will survive. Resist, and you will join the 47 other species who made the unfortunate choice to fight against inevitability." The message ended. Screens returned to normal programming, but nothing would ever be normal again. In the Pentagon's Emergency Command Center, Deep beneath Arlington, Virginia, the Joint Chiefs of Staff sat in stunned silence. General James Hawthorne, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, was the first to speak. Options? Sir, we've run preliminary simulations, said Admiral Chen, pulling up holographic displays. Every nuclear weapon in our arsenal wouldn't scratch that ship. Conventional weapons are useless. They can disintegrate matter at a molecular level. They have faster-than-light travel. I didn't ask for reasons we can't win, Hawthorne interrupted, his voice granite hard. I asked for options. The room fell silent again. Through the reinforced walls, they could hear the muffled sounds of organized chaos as hundreds of personnel scrambled to coordinate with world governments. Colonel Sarah Mitchell's voice crackled through the secure line from Nevada. General Hawthorne, this is Nellis Command. Sir, I watched 3 buildings cease to exist. No explosion. No debris. They just stopped being. If they wanted us dead, we'd be dead already. Then why aren't we? Hawthorne asked. It was Dr. Rachel Okonkwo, the civilian xenopsychology consultant hastily brought into the meeting, who answered. Because they think we're like the others. They've conquered 47 species by making them afraid. They're expecting us to break. And will we? Hawthorne asked, looking around the table. In that moment, something shifted in the room. It wasn't hope, hope would have been naive. It wasn't courage, courage would have been insufficient. It was something older. Something that had driven humans to stand against mammoths with stone-tipped spears, to challenge the ocean in wooden boats, to look at the stars and decide they belonged there too. It was the stubborn, irrational, absolutely human refusal to go quietly into the dark. No, sir, Mitchell's voice came through the speaker. We won't. Across the planet, similar conversations were happening. In the Kremlin, President Volkov slammed his fist on an oak table that had witnessed the Cold War. In Beijing, Premier Chen mobilized China's entire military-industrial complex. In Brussels, the European Union held emergency sessions. In New Delhi, Jerusalem, Canberra, Brasilia, the response was building. But it was in the smaller places that humanity's true nature began to show. In Houston, Elena Rodriguez put Maya to bed with a story about a princess who fought a dragon. She didn't tell her daughter that she'd spent the afternoon in her garage workshop, using her mechanical engineering degree to sketch modifications to their home's gas lines. If those ships came to Houston, if they came for Maya, Elena would show them that monsters weren't the only ones who could bring hell. In a Seattle machine shop, former Marine Daniel Cross stood with a group of veterans, looking at schematics for improvised weapons. They had no delusions about defeating a starship, but they'd be damned if they'd make it easy. In a Manhattan laboratory, Dr. Yuki Tanaka stared at quantum physics equations, searching for any theoretical vulnerability in the technology that could make matter cease to exist. The math was brutal, the odds were worse, but she kept working. In Atlanta, 12-year-old Marcus Johnson wrote in his journal, "The aliens think they can scare us. But my dad says humans are the scariest thing in the universe when you back us into a corner." I believe him. Marcus's father, Sergeant Thomas Johnson, was at Fort Benning, helping coordinate what military analysts were already calling asymmetric response protocols. A fancy term for guerrilla warfare against an enemy that could atomize cities. The Varanthi were monitoring all of this, of course. "Commander, the humans are mobilizing their military forces," Kalin reported, her patterns flickering with confusion. "All of them. Every nation simultaneously." Zelfris turned from the observation window. "Anticipated. This is the feudal resistance phase. They'll exhaust themselves, realize the impossibility of victory, and then surrender. Standard pattern. But sir, their communications, they're not behaving like the standard pattern." Voron pulled up intercepted messages. "They're not discussing surrender terms. They're not fragmenting into competing factions. They're unifying. Impossible, Zelfris said. Our intelligence showed they're a fractured species. Hundreds of competing nations. Multiple languages. Constant internal conflicts. That was accurate 48 hours ago, Voron said slowly. But since our message, something is changing. Their news media, their social networks, their government communications, they're all saying the same things. We stand together. Earth united. Not without a fight. Kalen's patterns dimmed with what might have been concern. Commander, should we proceed with a second demonstration? Perhaps something more severe to reinforce their fear? Zelfris considered this. The formula had worked on 47 other worlds. It would work on this one. Target their capital city. Not the entire city, just another military installation. Washington, District of Columbia. There's a building they call the Pentagon. Remove one section. Show them we can strike at their command structure whenever we choose. Coordinates locked, Kalen confirmed. Below, in the Pentagon's Emergency Command Center, alarms began screaming. Sir! The alien ship is powering up the same energy signature, a technician shouted. General Hawthorne looked at the threat display. They had maybe 60 seconds. Evacuate the building. All personnel, immediate. No. The voice came from a young captain at a computer terminal. Captain Jennifer Reeves, Data Analysis Division. General, look at the trajectory. They're targeting Section Searing, eastern side. Minimal personnel. They're trying to scare us again. Hawthorne stared at her. How do you know? Because if they wanted to kill us, we'd already be dead, sir. This is theater. Their betting will break. She turned to face him, and Hawthorne saw something in her eyes that made him understand why humans had survived everything from ice ages to plagues to their own worst impulses. So let's show them they bet wrong. The disintegration beam lanced down from the quantum serenity. Section Searing of the Pentagon, fortunately evacuated just minutes before, ceased to exist. And in the command center, nobody ran. Instead, General Hawthorne picked up the Global Military Coalition channel. All units, this is Hawthorne. The enemy has just proven they need us alive more than they need us afraid. That's weakness, people. That's an opening. Begin Operation Persistence. Across the planet, the response began. It wasn't glorious. It wasn't even particularly organized at first. But it was unmistakably human. A programmer in Singapore found a way to jam the Varanthi's communication frequencies for 3.7 seconds, not enough to matter, but enough to prove it could be done. A physics team in Germany discovered that the disintegration beam left a distinctive neutrino signature that could provide 0.3 seconds of warning, not much, but enough to evacuate. A manufacturing consortium in South Korea began producing millions of mirror-finished panels, useless as weapons, but if the disintegration beam was energy-based, maybe reflection. A cryptography group in Israel found patterns in the Varanthi's targeting algorithms. They preferred military installations, avoided hospitals, seemed to calculate minimum casualties. Weaknesses. Patterns. Predictability. Aboard the Quantum Serenity, Voron's patterns were flickering erratically. Commander, the humans, they're not responding correctly. Explain. Our psychological models predicted increasing panic, social breakdown, factional infighting as they blamed each other for the crisis. Instead, their cooperation indices are rising. They're sharing information across national boundaries. They're sacrificing individual resources for collective defense. They're adapting, Zelfris finished, his patterns showing the first signs of something the Varanthi had no word for because they'd never needed one. Uncertainty. They're still primitives with projectile weapons, Kalen insisted. What can they possibly do against us? As if in answer, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. Commander. Multiple launches detected from the planet's surface. Hundreds of missiles, conventional and nuclear warheads, coming from every continent simultaneously. Zelthrus's patterns flickered. Destroy them. The Quantum Serenity's defensive arrays activated, atomizing the incoming missiles with contemptuous ease. The explosions lit up the night sky over the Atlantic, visible from 3 continents. Primitive, Kalen said. Futile. But Voron was staring at his screens, patterns flickering with something that looked almost like panic, if the Varanthi were capable of such things. Commander, the missile launch was a diversion. While our defensive systems were engaged, the humans launched something else. Thousands of small objects. Too many to track individually. What objects? Unknown, sir. They're non-metallic. Minimal radar signature. They're spreading through orbital space around their planet like a cloud. On Earth, in a SpaceX facility in Texas, engineers watched their screens with grim satisfaction. All satellites deployed, one announced. They're crude, they won't last long, but we just ringed Earth with 10,000 eyes, his colleague finished. If those bastards want to attack anything on this planet, we'll see them coming. It was a small victory. Insignificant, really, in the scope of the conflict. But it represented something the Varanthi had never encountered before. A prey species that refused to act like prey. The 72-hour deadline approached. Aboard the Quantum Serenity, Commander Zelthrus reviewed the data with growing confusion. No surrender offers, Kalen reported. Not from any nation. They must have sent communications. Check for encrypted messages. Coded signals. We've intercepted everything, Commander. There are no secret surrender negotiations. Instead, she pulled up a compilation of human broadcasts. News anchors in 100 languages, all saying variations of the same thing: we will not surrender. We will not submit. If they want Earth, they'll have to take it from our cold, dead hands. Irrational, Zelthrus said. They must understand they cannot win. Dr. Rachel Okonkwo, still in the Pentagon Command Center, said something to General Hawthorne that would later be quoted in every history book written about the war. The Varanthi made one critical error in their research. They studied what humans fear. But they never studied what happens when we decide we're more afraid of submission than death. The deadline passed. Earth did not surrender. And Commander Zelthrus, for the first time in his long career, experienced something his species had thought extinct. He ordered the Quantum Serenity to begin the subjugation campaign, a systematic dismantling of human military capability through precision strikes. It should have been routine. It should have been efficient. It was neither. Because every time they destroyed a military base, humans evacuated civilians first. Every time they targeted infrastructure, humans had backups. Every time they demonstrated overwhelming force, humans found new ways to adapt. A Marine unit in California used mirror arrays to deflect a disintegration beam for 2.3 seconds, not enough to save the base, but enough to prove it was possible. A hacker collective in Amsterdam managed to crash one of the Varanthi's autonomous drones, giving humanity its first intact piece of alien technology. A resistance cell in rural Montana ambushed a Varanthi ground team with chemical explosives and automatic weapons, primitive tools that nevertheless killed 3 Varanthi soldiers before the cell was eliminated. And with each small victory, each minor success, each tiny proof that humans could fight back, the resistance grew fiercer. Zelthrus stood at the observation window, watching Earth rotate below. The planet should have been pacified by now. The humans should have broken. Instead, their cities blazed with light. Their communications networks hummed with defiant messages. Their weapons factories ran 24 hours a day, producing increasingly sophisticated countermeasures. Commander, Voron's voice was quiet. I've been analyzing human literature, trying to understand their psychology. I found something in their fiction that may be relevant. What? They have countless stories about monsters. Creatures that hunt them in the dark. And in every story, the humans find a way to fight back. There's a recurring phrase, "We are the real monsters." Zelfris turned from the window. What does that mean? Voron's patterns flickered with something that might have been the Varanthi equivalent of fear, if such a thing were possible. I think it means we made a mistake, Commander. We thought fear would make them weak. But their entire evolutionary history has been about being afraid and fighting anyway. About staring into the dark and running toward the things that scare them. About turning their fear into fury. Nonsense. They're primitives. Prey species. The ship rocked as something detonated against the hull. Minor damage, but damage nonetheless. Report. Zelfris commanded. The humans have weaponized their nuclear satellites, Kaelin said, her patterns showing shock. They're using them as suicide drones, ramming our defensive perimeter. It's working. Marginally, but... Another impact. Then another. And far below, in a bunker in Colorado, General Hawthorne watched the tactical display and allowed himself the smallest smile. They wanted to teach us fear, he said to Dr. Okonkwo. Instead, they're about to learn why humans are the scariest damn thing in the universe when you back us into a corner. He opened a channel to every military unit on the planet. All forces, this is Hawthorne. Operation Persistence is working. The enemy is adapting to our attacks, which means they're worried. Keep the pressure on. Make them afraid. Show them what happens when you pick a fight with humanity. Above Earth, in the quantum serenity, Commander Zelfris finally understood the true nature of his error. The Varanthi had eliminated fear through evolution. They had transcended it. Moved beyond it. But humans had done something far more dangerous. They had weaponized it. And now, for the first time in 10,000 years of Varanthi history, Commander Zelfris felt the cold touch of something his species had forgotten. He felt afraid. And somewhere in the depths of his genetically modified brain, a thought emerged that would change the course of the invasion. What have we awakened?